Let's open up where we were yesterday. Let's see. We were, and this was the STS that we opened up yesterday. It was called, the project was called webdev summer 1 2018, right? And we can execute it locally, connecting to the remote database, I believe. We had already configured that yesterday in the resources. We had pointed to this database on Heroku, the clear DB, and we had set these environment variables in the run configuration. So in the run configuration, we had for this app, we had set all these hard-coded values in there, right? So if you want to run it from within the IDE. So let's see, and it's up and running. And we had started on the user admin part of this, right? So let's try to go there. Again, this starts the a Tomcat server at 8080, and this is where we got so far yesterday, right? We styled it a little bit. We used Bootstrap to make it look a little more more pleasing. And typically, this is where this is what in industry somebody might give you as a starting point. Right, so somebody with some design pros, or somebody who has a better eye than you will come and style it for you, give it to you as a static HTML page with the classes already set, and your task as a developer is to make this for real, right? To make this actually connected to some data and dynamically render this page, right? Typically, it won't fall to you to make this look pretty. Typically, it'll be someone else. Although in this class, it will fall to you to make it pretty. We'll use Bootstrap. It's a very popular CSS library that makes it fairly simple, right, to just style and lay out pages to make them look presentable. Okay. All right. So let's see what we have so far. We have the source code under this web app directory, source main, and under jQuery, components, and the user admin. I don't particularly like Eclipse as a for editing at least HTML content. So instead, I'm going to open it up with WebStorm. WebStorm, I've navigated to the same exact directory, right, for the project, and I've opened it up in WebStorm. I've navigated to the same exact HTML document. Right, it's a little prettier. It has a better support for HTML, JavaScript in general. Okay, so we'll be sticking to this for the long run. Okay. All right, so let's see where we are. We got the user admin. We just have a static table. We have the input field at the top. We have some T body that has some hard-coded content for each one of the users of the system. And so we want to start making this dynamic. We'd like to be able to hit the database, perhaps grab some real users, and dynamically render them here. Okay, so to do that, what we're going to do is that we're going to have JavaScript, right? Grab a hold of the HTML, right, and say, okay, well, this is going to be the table body. Somehow I need to add multiple table rows in here dynamically, one for each user. So somehow it's going to have to grab that piece of HTML here, right? Also, we're gonna use one of these table rows as a template, right? Presumably, the designer has made an effort to make this look pretty, right? And probably they have added class files in here, referred to classes and styling. And our job is to don't touch that, right? Make it still look the way they gave it to us, all right? We're not going to second guess the designer on the look and feel, right? So probably the designer will also have copied and pasted multiple instances of rows of content, dummy content, just to make it just so you could see what it would look like when it's very long content. See how it scrolls and how it behaves. Oftentimes they won't show enough content, and they'll go through the happy path and say, okay, well, it looks nice with 10 users, but they haven't considered, so what about if this is 10,000 users, right? You're going to have 10,000 rows in here. So probably that there'll be a back and forth between the requirements that we'll have to revisit them and say, well, what about, do we need pagination here? Do we need scrolling, dynamic scrolling as you scroll and automatically? So all those questions might come up, and there'll be several discussions around that. Anyway, let's go back and remove that all that dummy content. So let's take one of these as a template, and we'll use the we'll use one of these rows as a template to dynamically render this. All right, so how do we do that? Well, we need to add a JavaScript. We need to use jQuery. jQuery is a very, very popular JavaScript library that solves one important problem, very, very important problem. It's available at jQuery.com. I encourage you to read through their documentation. But basically, the problem was that early on, there's a lot of competition amongst multiple browser vendors, and each one kind of started doing their own thing in JavaScript. Some of them more than others, and so you had this fragmentation of versions of JavaScript, and us as a developer, it was very hard for us to support the different versions of browsers that were out there. Right? There was no way for us to dictate what browser was our client, our users going to use, right? There's no way for us to. We could perhaps do that if we're building an application that's in-house, that is facing into an enterprise, and we can force employees to use a particular version of a browser. But if we're developing something that is going to be used by the masses, right, by lots and lots of folks, we can't dictate that, right? So anyway, so our JavaScript code tended to be a mess trying to figure out what version of the browser the user was using. And depending on the version, we had lots and lots of switch cases depending on, is this a Microsoft browser, Firefox, is it Safari, is it, what was it, right? And also different versions. What versions are you? And depending on what versions they were, we would implement certain behaviors, certain features, targeting that particular browser, right? It was just a nightmare. So what jQuery did is says, okay, well, after several years of doing this, a lot of design patterns starting to appear. How do you abstract the fact that I need to figure out what browser I'm using, and that I want to implement certain behaviors one way for one browser and another way for another browser. So what jQuery gave us is that layer of abstraction, right? That no longer are we necessarily coding directly to the browser. Instead, we're coding to the jQuery API, right? So if you say, hey, jQuery, add this piece of content, right? We use jQuery API, its API, and then jQuery will figure out, okay, I'm running on IE6, God forbid, and then it'll do the right thing, right? If it's running on some other browser, it'll do something else, okay? So jQuery really simplified, being able to target multiple browser versions without actually having to deal with all these fragmentation. Yes? It's very rare today that a JavaScript a project doesn't have jQuery as part of its libraries, right? To abstract the DOM, to abstract the browser. Make sense? All right. So let's we're going to be using jQuery. We're going to be using jQuery's CDN. So let's look for jQuery CDN. So CDN is a content delivery network, and it's basically a repository where all the source code can be found online. Right? We can certainly download jQuery and copy it onto our server, right? And then use it locally from our server. Okay, our web pages would load jQuery from the same server that HTML file is. Right? So it would look something like this. Right, so you would have your server here with your HTML file, your various JavaScript files, plus jQuery would be here, jQuery JS. The browser would ask for the HTML page, it would download, right, inside of the HTML page, there would be a reference back to jQuery. So the browser would have to go back to our server to fetch all our JavaScript, including our jQuery JavaScript, download them here, and once they're in the browser, they run and execute on the browser. Yes? Right, so there's certainly these are our own JavaScript that we wrote, but this JavaScript we didn't write. Right? jQuery wrote that. Okay? It's a very common library. Right? It would be a waste to have to copy it, right, on every single project, our project, your project, everybody's project. Right? Instead, a better way is to have it in a single place, such as a CDN, right? A CDN. That it's copied just only one place. I mean, the browser has to fetch the file anyway, right? The HTML comes, and then the HTML then goes and fetches the jQuery library anyway, right? So might as well fetch it for one single place, right? A single place of that contains that. Yes. Also, the benefits of fetching it from a CDN is that browsers remember when they visit multiple sites. Right, they remember that they have downloaded a particular file, right? So that if they see it, that it has been cached in their local file system, they won't re-download the file, right? Just to optimize that. So, I already have that file. I'm not going to re-download it. Okay. So if you actually are using a CDN, chances are that many other sites that are probably more popular than you, okay, are also using a CDN, right? And so typically, probably they've gone to Facebook, they've gone to Twitter, they've gone to all these other sites, and they probably have already downloaded jQuery from one of these very popular CDNs, okay? So chances are that the browser, when it gets to you and sees that you would need jQuery, if you download it from the CDN, chances are that it already has that file downloaded on their file system. Make sense? Right, so they're not going to re-download it. So the extra time that it would have had to go fetch the file, it's not going to actually do it. Right, so it's actually more optimal to use files that are hosted on CDNs. Make sense? Instead, if you host it yourself, the browser comes to your server. It doesn't really know you, right? You're not as popular as Facebook, right? So it probably is the first time that it sees you, says, "Oh, this is a new file. I don't have it," and it's going to download it. Unnecessarily, because it probably has exactly the same file, but downloaded from a more popular CDN. Make sense? All right. So in development, while you're developing, it's very convenient to have all your JavaScript in your development environment, okay? Because your IDE can do source completion, it can do all sorts of really nice optimization. But on production, when you deploy this to be used by everyone, typically you would switch your references to CDN files as opposed to local files. Make sense? All right, so let's use our JavaScript. Let's download. Let's reference a JavaScript from a well-known CDN. Let's copy it. All right, and we'll add it to our user admin. So JavaScript files are typically. Oh, that's not it. Are you copying this? Copy. Okay. All right, so there it is. So we have our script file. So script elements allow you to reference code that lives elsewhere. Notice that it's pointing to src. It's pointing to the location where this file is being downloaded. See that? Also notice the naming convention. It says jQuery-331 min. Right? That means that that file has gone through a minimization process. Right? That has a compiler has gone through it, right, and removed all white spaces, all necessary new lines and white spaces and tabs, things that are useful to humans, right, to parse the text, but it's irrelevant to a browser who's parsing this file. Okay, you can take a look at it. I believe they have a link to this minified. If you copy that and you paste it, you can take a look at this, right? So this is completely unreadable, right? And so it probably has gone through not only a minimization process, but probably has gone through an uglification process as well, right? So it'll go through a process where it will rename all the names of variables, right? So instead of having your nice naming conventions that you might have with your for good software engineering practice, it will change all the name variables, just with single letters, N, R, E, so that and also function names, but maintain the same functionality. Right? Again, to reduce the space and also to make it harder for anyone who wants to reverse engineer any of your code. Right? So there's the minification, and these files are could be fairly big. Another thing that's often done in practice is that this script typically the proper place to put it, right, is in the head, right here that begins the head, and here's where it ends, and that's where we put it. This is where the browser wants it, right? That's proper HTML syntax, right? But we tend to use quite a bit of these libraries. Not only jQuery, we might load many other libraries, okay? And these libraries are getting to be big and bigger and bigger, right? And the browser downloads this script, and it won't do anything else until it's done downloading that one script. If it has 10 of these, it'll have to download all 10 files, okay? So before it ever gets to any content, right? So it might spend a couple milliseconds, maybe even a second or two, just downloading JavaScript files before it ever gets to display anything for the user, right? And in the world of finicky users that are navigating your web page, every millisecond counts, right? They if you take a little too long to show me anything, right? I'm just gonna go somewhere else, right? You only have just a couple of seconds to grab the attention of that user, all right? So what folks tend to do is developers tend to do is to put all these scripts at the bottom of the body. Oops. Uh-oh, did I lose it? They tend to put it down here at the bottom of the body, right? It's not proper HTML, but the browser makes a guess at what you mean, right? And it says, oh, okay, yeah, it's a JavaScript. All right, so I'll download it. I'll interpret it correctly as a JavaScript file. So it's very common, right, to put JavaScript files at the bottom, right, of the content. Again, to gain those extra milliseconds, right, to very quickly show something, shoot something to the user, to grab their attention, and then in the background load all other libraries that are needed. Make sense? All right. Okay, so we've downloaded jQuery. We're ready to start coding our own pieces of code. Right, so we're going to create our own script, and we're going to refer to a local file that is going to be associated to this one template file. So we have a naming convention for that, right? So source. So there'll be a JS version of this, and it'll be the controller. So user admin.controller.client.js. Right? Notice that we're following a design pattern, the model view controller design pattern. Right? The HTML is typically would be responsible for just displaying content. The controller would be responsible for navigation, any logic, fetching any data that we need, and providing it to the front end. Okay. So let's take a look at what that file might look like. Notice the naming convention, right? Here's the controller, meaning the role of this file in the application, and then where is this being executed? It's being executed at the client, right? So let's create that JavaScript file here. Yes, add it. All right, so here's we're gonna have our JavaScript, and let's just say hello. So if we refresh our page, notice that it does has hello world, saying that our JavaScript has been loaded. We haven't done anything with jQuery just yet. Let's do a couple things here. One of the best practices is that we're going to need to use a design pattern, that deals with one problem in JavaScript, is that there is only one namespace. Okay, we don't have the concept in well, not older versions of JavaScript, newer versions of JavaScript do support. Like for instance, in Java or .NET, or you have the notion of a package, right? And typically you break up large pieces of code into multiple packages, right? So that you can deal with multiple namespaces. Yes. So that anything that's defined in a package is only visible within that package, and modules and things like that, right? Modular programming. In JavaScript, we don't have that, right? Well, anyway, the current versions of JavaScript. So we have to kind of kludge our way to accomplish the same kind of behavior, right? Especially because we're going to be using multiple libraries, right? jQuery is a library, React is another library, Angular is another library, Babel, just tons and tons of other people's libraries, right? That they are defining functions and variables and all sorts of things, right? And since there's one namespace, we could have a name collision, right? You declare a function and I declare the same function with the same name. The last one wins, right? If you have a function there's no such thing as an overloading or it's only overriding, right? If I have a function that's called the same name as your function, mine wins, right? The last one loaded overrides the previous one, okay? So to do that, we have to kind of create our own little namespace, right? So that we don't compete with all those other namespaces. Make sense? Right? One namespace that behaves like everybody else is when you declare something in a function. When you declare something in a function, all variables are local, right? Meaning they're opaque to anybody outside of the function. Nobody can see any variables declared in the function. Make sense? So let's start with that. Typically, we first declare a function. Right? Anything we declare inside that function is opaque to anything outside. Right? So we want to basically code everything in that one function. Right? All our code in that one, or multiple single functions like this. Right? So we would say alert. Right? And we would do hello world. Right? Let's call it, let's call it hello. Now, if we reload the page, notice that our alert doesn't appear. And the reason is that, we've accomplished our objective. Alert is unavailable to the outside world. The only way that would be available is that if we literally call hello. Yes? So if we refresh, we're back to where we were earlier. But now we're kind of going backwards, right? We're calling a function. We're calling a function that is a particular name, and we might be overriding some other function that is also called hello. So the whole point was that I did not want to override anybody else's function, right? So I kind of like for this to be kind of like anonymous, have no name, right? So I don't compete with anybody else there. But there's no way to call a function if it doesn't have a name, right? Because I want to put everything in there to protect it. So how do I do this? Well, actually, you can in JavaScript. You can use this syntax. This says this is an anonymous function, and I want you to call it. Right? It's a throwaway anonymous function, and everything that's declared in there is private. It's not overriding anybody else, right? And notice that I did not give it a name, so it's not colliding with anyone else. Yes, right? So let's if we refresh, notice that it works just like we were earlier. Make sense? It's a very, very common design pattern. It's becoming less and less common now that we've introduced the new versions of JavaScript that do introduce packages, modules, and things like that. Right? But that's not entirely supported across all browsers just yet. Okay? So if you're doing JavaScript, bare bones JavaScript, and jQuery, this is the way to go. Right? When we next week when we talk about React components and whatnot, they'll be using new versions of JavaScript, such as classes and whatnot, and export, all the great new things about the new ECMA. All right. Okay. So there we go. So we have a poor man's module implementation. Right. This design pattern is referred to as an IFI. So this means immediately invoked function expression, right? It's an expression, it's a function that it's immediately invoked, Very, very common. All right, so let's do what we want to here. So we don't want just to do alert. What do we want to do? All right, so we want to be able to manipulate this HTML file. We want to be able to grab it and do things with it. Okay. So for instance, we might want to perhaps we might want to grab these input fields. We like to be able to listen to this button click. We like to be able to grab this table row and maybe copy it and paste it multiple times. We want to go back to the server and fetch some data. So let's do that. So what can we? Let's see what can we do. Let's we can dynamically add content. So how do we do that? So to be able to manipulate the content, we're going to be using the jQuery function. The jQuery function. Okay? This jQuery function is declared by this script right here. When it goes out and downloads this file, right? What the browser will do, it will immediately execute that file. Okay, that's the default behavior for interpreting JavaScript files. Right? It will download it and execute it. Whatever, if you have a function there that is called a function call, it will call that function. Right? So that script there declares a single function, right? The jQuery function, right? And this is how you spell it: J uppercase Q U E R Y. Right? And it's a very powerful function. It does all sorts of things, right? Let's see, what can we do? We can grab. Let's see. Let's grab this H1 over here. You can pass jQuery all sorts of arguments, right? And depending on what you pass it, it will do different things, right? You can pass it, for instance, a string that represents a CSS, a style sheet selector that you can refer to different parts of the document. For instance, this H1, we can grab it, and this says, grab me all elements that are named H1. Okay, and once I have it, I can store it maybe in a local variable, H1. Once I have that variable, I can manipulate it. Right? Let's see. We have the H1 right now is this user admin. Right? One of the things that we could do is change its CSS style, its color. For instance, we can say I want to change the CSS color and make it red. And it didn't work. Wait, what? Did we grab it? Oh, console. What do we have here? Oncut jQuery is not defined. What? Did we not add it? Oh, I have it at the bottom of the page. Thank you. Let's bring it back up. Our script would also have to live down there. Console. Okay, so that worked. Okay, it didn't blow up. And if we can notice that the right-hand side is your best friend. If you do an inspect, it opens up the right-hand side, our inspector. And you can see the HTML. This is the DOM that was parsed and generated by the browser. But you can also see source code. You can see any source code that was downloaded. And there's our JavaScript. There it is that we wrote. And we can actually put a breakpoint, right, and step through it. You should always step through your code, see what's going on. And if you refresh it, we can put on H1. It says length 0, meaning I didn't find any H1. I didn't find any H1. You would scratch your head and say, wait, what do you mean you didn't find H1? There is an H1. There it is. Right. So the reason is that notice that we are doing it before the DOM has been parsed. Okay. The browser hasn't had a chance to read the H1. Okay, it executed our code before there were anything created in the DOM. So somehow we have to wait for our document to be parsed, right? And so that we can actually start manipulating the DOM, the document object model. Right. So let's do that. Another thing that jQuery can do is to listen for the document to be loaded. Right. And one way to do that is that we can give it as an argument some function, any function. Say main, right? And what that will do is that this will declare a listener on the document to be waiting for it to be loaded, right? So unload, basically it adds an unload event handler. When the document is loaded, then notify me and call this function, right? So main would be a callback function, and here it is, here's a function main. And now we can put our code in there. So our code now will execute only after the document has loaded. Make sense? All right. All right. So let's do that. Let's try this again. Remove the breakpoint, and now it's red. Okay. So it found H1 and it changed it. Yes.
Let's say you move both our local script and jQuery to the end of the body.
Yep. Right. Then I wouldn't have to do that. I wouldn't have to do that. Right. Yep. Exactly. Because it has already parsed the DOM already there. Yep. Okay, so basically H1 now is a variable, right? It's a jQuery object, right? It's an object that is created by the jQuery library, which you can then manipulate. It adds all sorts of behaviors such as this .css, right? Or you can change content. You can say H1 dot. I want to change the HTML. I want to change it to instead of user admin, I wanted to say user administration. Okay. So if I refresh, notice that indeed I can manipulate it. Right. So for an instance, it's the previous DOM content. For an instance, it's black, and then right after it becomes red, and the content is modified. Yes. Notice that if I go back to the DOM. And I look at the actual content, if I say inspect this element, the element is, notice that it says style equal color colon red, and that the content actually has been changed, user space administration exclamation point. Right, that's the power of JavaScript, right? You can manipulate the DOM, and then the browser re-renders whatever the DOM is, the latest version of the DOM. Make sense? All right, excellent. So let's see if we can do the same thing with this row down here. Let's grab that row. That row is where? Let's see. That row is this row. It's right after the T body. Yes?
Sorry, before we go, as far as I get you, when you say jQuery H1, it selects all H1s?
Yeah, in this case, it would have selected all H1s.
What if we have several H1s?
You would have to either create a unique identifier or a class, or that's something that you can grab onto, right? So for instance, that's a great question. Let's add another H1 here. Let's put it after the table. We have another H1. This is another H1. Notice that they all say the same thing, right? They're all red, and now they're all changed to the text, right? So if you want to target an individual H1, we can distinguish them by saying that this is the title. We say that this is a unique identifier ID, and this is the title. Okay, and on the other side here in JavaScript, you can say either H1 whose ID is title. Okay, so meaning I only want you to modify the title, right? So notice that it only modifies that first one, but not the second one. Yes.
The variable is a list then.
The variable is yes, it's an array. Yep, it's an array. And remember, one of the attributes there was length. You know, how many are there? So if it's 0, meaning nothing matched. Okay. Yes.
So you have another element that also has an ID of type.
ID are unique. You're not supposed to. They're supposed to be unique within the document.
Oh, okay.
Yes. But say you have multiples that you want to change some H1s, but not some other H1s.
Yeah, if it's array, can I say something like select on the first instance of H1?
Yeah, you can iterate over them, just like any other array. Yep. So for instance, if you have, say you have multiple, yes?
So if I remove the H1, just have the ID, will it still work?
It still work, yes.
Okay.
Excellent question. Since it's unique, I don't really need to say that it's H1. There's only one element whose ID is title. Yeah, that also works. Yeah, that also works, right? But if you have multiple H1s, say you have some. This should be red. Some of them are green, also red, and this you want green, also green, and this is blue. So, for instance, you want to group them, right? Some you want some way, some of them you want another way, right? So what you can do is that you can use instead classes. Classes allow you to group things together. These are all the same class, the same type of thing, all right? And you can give them arbitrary names, such as this belongs to the red class, and this is also part of the same red class, whereas this is part of the green class, and this is also green, and this is just blue all by itself. It's all blue. It's all alone. So here we can grab these elements and say, okay, well, grab me the red ones. I'll grab. You know what? jQuery is so long. It's so annoying. You have to type 6 letters, of which one is capital. There's an alias, right? There's an alias called $, which is still two keystrokes, which you can use here other elements, other selectors to grab that one element. So you can say dot meaning the element whose class is, right? Dot is the element whose class is red, right? Here's I can grab all the green ones. So this would be $ green, and this would be blue and blue, right? And then I can change red. I can set the style to be the color red. I can also change its background color, CSS, to be background color to be white, right? And so let's do that. Let's see that. Notice that red and also red are. Oh wait, no. I think what I wanted to do is backwards. I want to do the color to be white, the foreground color to be white, and the background to be red. How's that? There we go, right? So we changed just those two. We could do the same thing with green and blue and whatnot. Yes? Notice that we're doing multiple operations on the same element, right? So it could, and it's very common that you grab one of these objects and you do multiple transformations, right? Multiple operations on them, right? So this could become. So one way to make it a little bit more readable is that you can chain these together. Right? I don't know if that's more readable. You can you read off the right hand? You can't, right? But you can also just do an enter, right? It knows that it's the same operation on the same object, right? So it's red.css, color white, background red, right? And this works just the same. So yeah, jQuery provides these functions are smart enough that at the end of the function they return the original object, right? So they coded it that way, right? They coded it so that these functions could be chained together, one after another. Right? They had to run in that way to support that feature. And that's a very common design pattern in JavaScript in general, right? That a function will do an operation, and the very last thing that it does is that it returns the original object that it operated on, so you can then chain them together. Make sense? All right, it's very, very common. All right, excellent. So let's try and grab this table row. Right? We could grab it put it in an ID. We could put it a class. So let's give it a class, and say that this is a template. This is a template for a user. I want to be able to grab that user, right, and then copy and paste it multiple times. Right? So let's do that. Let's see. Let's grab the tr, from $dot template. Okay, and we can clone that. We can clone lots of these guys, right? So we can say var tr1. We can say tr.clone. Right, so that creates an in-memory representation, right, an in-memory DOM element, right, that is not yet in the DOM, right? It's in memory. It's stored in the variable tr1. It hasn't made it itself yet into the DOM, right? Notice that even though I clone it, notice that I still only just have one row. Yes, right? To put it, I need to put it back into the DOM for it to be rendered, right? So how do I put it back into the DOM? Well, what we could do is we need to be able to append it or add it to somehow at the bottom of that T body. See that? Right? And we're going to have a copy of that table row, and we want to add it right at the end of that. So we need to grab the T body as well. So let's grab the T body. So var T body. T body. Right? And once we have the T body, we can append the brand new tr1. Right? If we record, notice that we have the tr1 there added. See that? So we dynamically added this Alice there, right? If we had some kind of an array of users, right, we could iterate over that array and clone multiple times, right, and then just append to the T body over and over and over. Right, so if we had something like var users, such as an array of objects that had all usernames, username, and this would be Bob, and here's another username, Charlie, right? We could iterate over that and just do this appending, right, in a loop. Right, so let's do that. So we get the body. We can do like a for loop. We can say var I equals 0 of the where I is less than users.length and I plus plus. Right. So as we're iterating, right, we can print out each user. Console. We can say var the user would be users sub I. Okay, and we could just do a console log the user, see if that prints out. We can go to the console and display. Notice that we can't print those two users, right? We just iterate over them. What do we want to do as we iterate over them? We want to clone these things, right? So we want to grab this tr1, right? Put it down here, clone it in the loop, and as we go, we're going to append it to the body. Yes? Right, so let's do that. So if we refresh, notice that it didn't work. Wait, what? Okay, yes, it added those two rows, but it still says Alice. Right? Somehow we need to populate, right? We need to populate the username with Bob and whatnot. Who's the first user? Bob and Charlie. So we need to populate with Bob and Charlie, right? So this tr1 is a clone of this tr, this table row, yes? We would need to somehow grab the first table data and change it to Bob, right? And then change the second one to Charlie, yes? Right? So somehow, once we have the clone, we need to navigate into that clone, grab the table data, and manipulate it by hand, yes? So let's do that. So what we'll do is that so that we can grab it easily, let's add a class, right, say such as maybe username, so that we can, given that table, that clone, find me the username, right, table data, and then manipulate it and change the HTML content to be the username. Yes? Right, so let's do that. We have the table row, or we'll call it clone. The clone. We'll do a clone dot find me. Within that clone, find me the element whose class is username. Right? I got the username. Now I have it. I could store it in a variable. Or I can just remember what this does. It just returns the object that it found, right? And I can change the HTML content I can change it to be what? It would be user.username. And let's put this here. Okay? Let's do that. Let's re-render. And notice that we have now Bob and Charlie. Yes? We have Bob and Charlie. Right. So we've learned that we can append things into the DOM. We can read things from the DOM. We can manipulate elements, brand new elements that we generate on the fly. Right. So we can play around with the DOM at our leisure. Right. That's what jQuery allows us to do. Yes.
How does it know where to append?
So append, like the name suggests, it just appends it to whatever you have. So in this case, tbody, we're saying append to the tbody, meaning at the end of tbody, append it.
Like, don't we have the H1 there?
Well, within tbody. Tbody is the parent of many children, right? So this will add it as the last child inside of the tbody, right? So if you open it up in the element, in the table body, it adds it into the tbody. There's append, there's prepend, right? You can also put it at a particular position. jQuery is huge, right? We're only going to be able to just scratch the surface, right? With all the sorts of manipulation and transformations that jQuery allows you to do, all right? We could just have a semester on just jQuery, right? So we're just going to have 2 days. Yeah, but the interesting thing is that the libraries that we're going to look at next week, Angular, React, all these libraries, underneath, right, their engine of manipulating the DOM, right, is built on top of jQuery, right? So what they've done is that, like good humans that we are, we create abstraction layers, right? Abstractions on top of abstractions on top of abstractions. We kind of start forgetting that it's all zeros and ones, right? We've come a long way, and we no longer write code in assembly. We create abstractions layers, right? So that's what these libraries do, right? jQuery is a very thin layer of abstraction, right? It's the closest you can be, or that you want to be, to the actual DOM, right? And then on top of that, they've built other abstraction layers. Okay. All right, so there, we have an array, and we can generate content using that array. We just have to get that array. Where do we get that array, right? That array, we want it from the server. The server has that array, right? Let's see if we can get that piece, okay? All right, let's do that next.